Welcome to the Startup Grind.
I wish this happened everywhere I went. This is great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're super grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
So just get relaxed. We got you some water.
Does everybody have a drink?
And some drinks.
Good.
So let's start with kind of the beginning. Give them a little bit of background about where you grew up, maybe where you went to school and all of that. And then we'll kind of get into BuzzMob and how that all.
So I am from here, and I don't really understand how anybody that grows up here decides to leave. I wasn't born here though. I was born in Silicon Valley. I was born in Burlingame. My parents lived in San Mateo, but I was only there until I was 2. So we came down here when I was 2. And except for going to school in Santa Barbara, I've been between Orange County and Los Angeles ever since. So I started out school in the UC system at Santa Barbara. Loved it. Because I didn't get into film school at USC right out of high school, they let five people in. They let 5 people in. So yeah, dreams dashed. But I managed to work I can curse a little bit, right?
Yeah, you do whatever
all right,
you want.
okay, because I don't really filter. So I worked my ass off for 2 years from Santa Barbara. I was taking unpaid internships in Los Angeles to get into film school. 3 days a week, I was driving 2 hours each way from Santa Barbara to LA so that I could build up my resume to get into USC Film School. I did with 43 people, a little better. And then I went to film school, and then I worked in entertainment for a few years after that, and started in branded entertainment. Is this going to be a further question? Should I hold off?
No, keep going. You're doing
Okay,
awesome.
so I worked in entertainment for a few years. I was producing movies. I was always the producer. I always had a co-producer that would do all the I dotting and T crossing because I absolutely hate that to this day. And I did all the deal making and made things happen, if you will. Worked in movies for a couple of years. Pitched a branding firm that's based in Atlanta that was working with Fortune 50, 100 companies. Coca-Cola, Home Depot, Pepperidge Farm, Delta, on a concept to bring their ideation process to entertainment, which branded entertainment wasn't really an industry then, but I had a reason to believe that those two things would kind of be inextricably tied. So I was a 23-year-old kid, and I pitched this branding firm in Atlanta. Here's why you should kind of fund a company for me, and here's how I'm going to bring your, what they called master idea of a brand, into entertainment. And they funded that, and they actually, they backed it, and I was going back and forth from Atlanta to here. It's crazy, for a couple of years. And that was, I guess, theoretically the first company that I started.
Awesome. So what influenced you to become an entrepreneur? Was there a person or something that happened? Did you just wake up and have a dream? And you're like, oh, I have an idea, and then it just started?
Yeah. So I think I have a controversial answer for this. And like she said, I mentor at Founder Institute. And I've said this a few times, and sometimes it gets met with, I don't know, a little bit of backlash. But I don't believe that you become an entrepreneur. I actually think it's a curse. I mean, that sounds bad, right? But it's a difficult existence, right? So, so I don't know that I ever kind of became an entrepreneur. I mean, people will ask, what was the first thing you can remember selling? And the honest truth is, when I was in 7th grade, I had a business that got shut down by the principal because I was doing enough sales of candy from my locker. I mean, I'm not joking. It sounds ridiculous, but I started selling airheads and blow pops, whatever I could get at the best margin, or I could sell at the best margin that my mom would take me on weekends, and I would go and stock up and sold that out of a locker. Eventually, I had 3 other kids selling for me in other lockers, and I got shut down because you can't do that. They were selling, I don't know what the reason was. They also sold candy and vending machines, so I think maybe that competition was the reason. So I don't know that you become an entrepreneur. I don't know there was an impetus for me, but I know that in any situation where I've been a part of a team or where I've felt a cog in a system in any way, I kind of just naturally feel a bit like a caged animal, where I feel like I can see a horizon, whether my horizon is right or not, but I feel like I can see a horizon, and I can't play a large enough role in trying to get there, that it's never really been an option for me. It sounds ridiculous, but I guess I've been out of school for 13 years, and I've never had a job, right?
So, what and how did the idea for BuzzMob start then? Like, let's start there.
Yeah. So you know that the name for this session was it's okay to pivot, right? So
yes.
she just introduced me as founder and CEO of an education or an ed tech platform. But when we started, I mean, the idea for this came at an Angels game, right? Like I said, I've been here for forever. I was in the outfield at an Angels game in 2010, and Facebook was up and going. Had several 100 million users. Twitter was kind of growing. There was social media influence, and people were sharing things. But I had this moment where, sitting in the outfield, I kind of looked around, and everybody's, sans a few 4, 5, 6-year-olds, was staring at their phone. And it was like a creepy moment. People probably, it's so common now that you probably feel like it's normal, but it just sort of hit me, and I knew that they're sharing content or sharing something interesting out, right? And I just pictured everybody sharing these little messages going out, out, out. And you're kind of at a quintessential moment where everybody, a baseball game, right? I mean, and Angel Stadium is 360. So everyone's focus and everyone's attention and everyone's interest is in the center, right? It's in, but all of our sharing is out. So to me, it just seemed rational. I said, how are these 45,000 people not connected in some way to communicate about what we're all sharing? And then the business side of me, so that was like the fun kind of marketing side of me. And the business side of me is thinking, and how is the organization or the franchise not using that to their advantage, right? I've got all these people that are sharing whatever information out, but I can also harness this. So that's where it came. I mean, I became an insane person. I already owned a company at the time. I owned a clothing company, and I immediately became kind of obsessed with this idea of creating a technology product that was location-based, that would connect these people in a given spot where they're interested in, you can assume they're interested in the same thing. And we built it. I mean, I basically went and I kind of vetted the idea to probably 20 of my most trusted people in technology within a couple of weeks. And maybe within 3 or 4 weeks, I had a little bit of initial seed. I had found a co-founder and was kind of off to the races.
So let's talk about your co-founder, Edmund Wong.
Mm-hmm.
How did you both first connect? And how is your day-to-day, because basically you guys work together.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I first met Edmund. I was still in the apparel industry, and I was at a trade show. I don't know if anybody's worked in an industry where you have to go to trade shows, and you go and you set up your booth, and there's thousands of people in this room. And the first thing you want to do is you want to go and you talk to the other people that are around your booth and kind of get acclimated, and you find out what they do so you can hopefully send them some business and vice versa. So this guy across the way from me, I went and sat down and introduced myself, and I said, how'd you get into apparel? And he told the story. And he said, my father owned factories and ran factories in China for years, and we produced things for action sports, etc. And so I had originally moved into apparel because that was my dad's deal. When I was growing up, I had every pair of OP corduroy shorts that you could possibly do because my dad was the president of Ocean Pacific, right? So, and other ones, Hang 10, Side Out Sport Volleyball, all these things. That's what he did. And he said he stopped counting trips to Asia at 130 something, right? So he would go all the time. And there were very few names of associates that he had that I would remember from childhood. And so I'm talking to this guy, and he starts saying his dad had factories in Asia, et cetera. And then I said, who do they make for? And he said, well, we've made everything for OP. And I kind of looked down at his name tag, and I said, wait, my dad used to run OP. And I said, is your dad George Wong? And he said, is your dad Peter Jackel? And it was there were probably like 3 names in the world that I would have remembered from being a kid and having my dad and George Wong they were friends. My mom went to China before you could go to China with his mom when I was a baby, right? So random. So then we struck a friendship. He's kind of my polar opposite, which is something that I have always looked for in somebody that I'm going to work with. And I think it's kind of a balance of strengths and weaknesses, which I actually think that it's more important to know your weaknesses than your strengths. So, but to answer your question about day-to-day, it was different in the beginning than it is now. Now there's teams to kind of fill in the gaps, but in the beginning, neither one of us are technical founders, right? So I know enough development knowledge and coding to kind of get myself in trouble, which happens all the time. But neither one of us were technical founders, so we basically immediately had to kind of hire for that. So, but our back and forth is pretty good because kind of everything that that I don't feel as comfortable doing, or I know that I'm not good at, he's great at, and vice versa.
And I've heard you talk about that a lot at
Yeah.
some of the different meetings and stuff we've had.
Yeah, knowing your weaknesses, I think, is like the absolute best thing. Being honest about them is, you know, that's like one of the first questions that I ask any interviewee when they get to a certain point. And if they kind of give me one of those canned things that like is like a strength disguises a weakness, I'm kind of, you know, that's just bullshit.
Is there any one thing that stands out that you've learned over the years that might help an entrepreneur today?
I only get one thing?
Yeah, only one.
Oh my
We
God.
don't have time for more.
Wow. This is hard. I think that would be my one thing. Like, be ready for it. Like, only do whatever it is you're looking to do if you absolutely have to. If there's no other option, because it's honestly the only way that you'll get far enough to even find out whether it's going to work. So recognize that it's going to test every relationship that you have inside a company and outside of a company. I know I'm now kind of like blending multiple answers, but if you happen to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't understand this like burning thing in you, just get out right now. It will absolutely fall apart. Sorry. I've been there. When anybody started college, did somebody tell you about like the turkey drop? No? Where you're going to get into school and by Thanksgiving you're going to break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend?
Oh.
I don't know what the word for it is in entrepreneurship. I want to say it's probably like seed round drop or something, but like when you put the priority of raising this capital or something above your relationship, like they're going to be out, and that's got to be okay. I'm married now. I got married 2 months ago, so I found the one that's like cool. Thank you.
You're very open about failures.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a failure that you had and maybe what you learned?
Yeah. Again, I think I have a contrarian perspective of this. I think everyone's kind of like, I don't know, aggrandizing failure right now. I think it's like a big thing. If you read, and maybe there's questions about it, I read more than I probably should. I'm obsessed with reading everything that I can, both on my industry as well as just getting other people's perspective on things. Not to take them and kind of meld myself into them, but to understand a different perspective, because I think it helps in business development. But people are saying failure is so great, but failure sucks, right? It's like the hardest thing. It's like the worst breakup that you've ever had in your entire life. But I mean, let's be honest. You put more effort into this than you ever put into any relationship. Well, when you're young, anyway. I'm thinking of failure. So a failure the first business that I say that I kind of started, post junior high, candy sales. Was the brand entertainment company, and I pitched these guys. I maybe got a little bit in over my head, if you will. I mean, it took a couple of years for me to realize that their vision didn't really line up with mine, and it fell apart. And I had basically what I thought at the time was, oh my God, I wasted 2 years when I could have been building something else. I could have been building whatever it was, and it was entertainment. So I don't know if people have worked in entertainment at all. There's a lot of kind of, I don't want to say selfish interest, but there's a lot of people that just want a lot of notoriety, and once your investors start sending you script ideas that they want to make with the names of their children as the lead characters, you start thinking, there's some personal interest in this that don't align with where I'm kind of heading, and it was hard to take. I mean, I was 25, and I had to kind of shut the thing down, and I wasn't really worried about what do I do next, but I felt like I could have controlled this, right? I felt like I could have done more, I could have done something. And the truth is sometimes it's out of your control and you have to be honest with yourself on that. But that was hard. That was hard to like kind of get back up and keep moving. But I feel like once you have something that really knocks you down once and you get up and you get kind of back on the horse and you grow momentum, every time after that, so failure sucks, but failure gets easier, I guess is the moral of what I'm trying to say. The first one was awful. I felt like I was, never going to get to do something again. And then the next time that you try something and it doesn't work, it's a little bit easier.
Can you talk a little bit? You have an interesting story about raising money. Your first investor. Mm-hmm. Can you share the story? I was like, when I first heard it, I was like, wow.
How I did the first?
With the PR company that you got the introduction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the first, but I'll give you my whole fundraising story because I know it's pretty funny. So like I said, I mentor all the time, and I probably talk to 20, 30 entrepreneurs a week that are asking me to kind of like help them get perspective if I can, which is great. I mean, I absolutely love what's going on in Orange County right now with this. But for whatever reason, the most common question is constantly about fundraising. I understand it because, you get to a point where you say, I can't take this any further. So my fundraising story, at least, I'll stick with BuzzMob. I've now raised money for a few different companies, but in BuzzMob, my co-founder, Edmund, essentially came in, and aside from offering kind of everything that he does as far as knowledge and capabilities, I also, basically needed money overnight to start this process of building a prototype because I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere with that. So the arrangement was, partially in a kind of a little upfront dollars, and then also I need introductions to people to try and raise our friends and family or seed round. So essentially I said, look, if you bring me people because I'll reach out to my own network, but bring me people that you think would be great as investors and as partners for this. And if we raise in excess of X, then here's additional equity, right? And it happened. 3 people came to the table that weren't through my doing. All 3 of them ended up, or 4 people, 3 of them wanted to invest. We chose 2, and then equity goes, and equity goes, and equity goes. And then after that, what Naomi's talking about is we ended up working with a PR firm that was based in New York, and we became really friendly with them. And one of the people who was on our account thought that a personal friend of his might be interested in investing. So we did an equity deal with the PR company, I should say. So they were already invested, right? Which I'm a big believer in, and I don't know if we'll get to that, but I'm a big believer in people that are on your team really being on your team. Skin in the game, meaning they're either working for it or they actually are in some way invested, meaning the upward trajectory of what you're doing benefits them more than any dollars that they're actually giving you or putting out. So PR company, part of our deal was equity to this day, and one of their guys introduced us to just an outside person that ended up doing, I skipped around in there, we raised $600,000 through that previous, and then they ended up doing our first kind of, I guess it's institutional sort of, but $2 million round. Came through sort of like a fluke through a PR company.
And it really was like you went to pitch, you flew to New York, pitched
a
group.
That's a good story.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. I was like, wait,
So that's the good part about that story is it's interesting. I had planned, and I still believe to this day, that in best case scenario, you want to get a syndicate of investors, because. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in not taking money for money's sake. If someone's going to bring money to the table and it's just money, it's not that money's easy to find, but in my experience, their relationships, their capabilities, the breadth of their whole network is going to do more for you than the dollars. The dollars makes it feasible for you to actually transact on whatever they bring to the table, but they have to bring something to the table. So I was looking for a syndicate. It was a $2 million round. I hoped that I would get 4 people at $500,000. And I flew to New York, and I met with this gentleman, and I said, look, we're raising a $2 million round. We'd like to have that to be 4 or 5 guys. Would you be interested in putting in $500,000? I did my whole, song and dance and met with them, and he said, I don't like to share. And I was kind of like, what's okay? And I said, what, so? And he says, if I do this, I'm doing the full $2 million. And I part of me wanted to be like, all right, awesome, round done. I can go back and focus on the business. But part of me also said, well, look, can you understand why I want to work with a syndicate? I mean, it's about relationships, and keep in mind, we weren't going to schools at the time. We were going to, professional sports teams and concert venues and professional musicians, and I just assumed that, relationships of 5 people would be better than the relationships of 1. He did a pretty good job of convincing me that they had the relationships when he essentially called owners of 5 different sports teams with me in the room, and I was like, all right, thank you. Here's the wire instructions. So that worked out. I mean, it sped up. That shortened the timeline dramatically, right? Every time that you want to raise capital, you're going to expect to spend 6 to 9 months if you're in that. Maybe 3 to 6 if it's about $2 million. But it sped that up dramatically, which, who knows the benefit of that. But
And talking about investors and investment, what are some ways that you think are good for entrepreneurs to connect with potential investors today? Like, is there like building relationships?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it's always been introductions. It's always been personal relationships. Not that I had the relationship with the person who ultimately invested, but it's been somebody who found, took an interest in what we were doing, and then made a relationship to someone that they care about. So it's always kind of a second hand. In some cases, it's been personal relationships, but and I know I shouldn't say this at the OC startup grind, but don't solely look in Orange County. I'm a big believer, and believe me, we're currently raising a round right now, and I would absolutely love to have an investor that is based in Orange County. But depending on what type of thing that you're building, there may not be enough money being spent here. There's a lot of money here, but there may not be money kind of being spent here, or it's in kind of little pockets where you don't know that it is. So I think networking is huge, and I think what's happening, even this is a great example, right? Even if there aren't too many investors here, I think people start hearing about these things and maybe watching this, and they'll start learning that. So, what becomes a referral could be through some sort of social means, right?
So do you have any mentors?
Wow.
I know you're a mentor. But did you have any mentors as you were?
I do, and this is going to sound weird, but the guy who was part of the failure that I said before, who was the investor and who ran this company out in Atlanta, for a while, I think I would consider a mentor. I don't really speak with him much anymore, but his guidance kind of early on, and it wasn't even so much specifically business. It was kind of just a way to look at the world of it's branding. I don't know how many people do branding, but they started themselves as what they call the world's first ideation corporation, which ideation is like a step above branding in being ethereal, right? It's in the clouds. It's kind of like frilly, and what does this make you think of and feel, and So, but that influence for me was one of kind of the importance of things being subliminal, if that makes sense, or kind of below what you're actually talking about, subtext, right? So in film school, it's here's what's going on in the scene. I know I'm winding all around, but I swear to God I'll land this plane. Here's what's going on in the scene, but here's what's really going on in the scene, kind of thing, right? So I think the mentors that I've had in my life have kind of taught me more about how to handle situations and how to work with people to get across what you really want and what this kind of larger goal is, versus people who have sort of taught me, here's how you raise money, and here's how you structure a company, and here's how you manage developers versus how you manage your creatives, and that kind of thing. It's more about a couple mentors that have taught me how you sort of treat people and treat situations and not take certain things too seriously, to kind of make sure that everybody's interests are aligned in the same way. So I have had mentors, they just haven't been the kind that I think hopefully I'm that kind of mentor now, I don't know. So like I said, in the very beginning, you kind of have to hire for your weaknesses, and that's your weakness and your co-founder's weakness, and ours was technical. We started here. I'm a big believer in centering your entire technical team around someone that's building your APIs or web services, especially because I don't know how many people are or what they're doing, but if you're building something that's cross-platform, you absolutely need kind of that nucleus of the thing to be watertight and to be right under in your home, and then the peripherals kind of play off of that. So our early development team, I kind of said, I would sacrifice any kind of dollars for me or co-founder or executive team to make sure that we were able to spend more on our kind of API and core development to be in-house. Our CTO that we hired early on he had created StubHub, and he was out of Silicon Valley, and that was really interesting. It was kind of a different perspective because we were kind of, we knew what we were doing, but we didn't entirely know what we were doing. And here's somebody who had built this huge company and sold it for millions of dollars, and was able to come in and kind of put a little bit of structure in place where we previously didn't have structure. So I think it's a case of doing what your dollars will allow at the time, and then picking and choosing where it's okay to kind of not skimp, but get by. So our mobile developers right now are actually in Kosovo, which I've had the best experience with. I had developers in India, I had developers in Hawaii, strange as that is, and Kosovo so far has been absolutely amazing.
Great. I think I don't know if we skipped over, but can you kind of tell us exactly what BuzzMob is today? Like, yeah. What is that app? Because I think I kind of talked about it in the opening, but we kind of skipped over that, but I think you should share what it is.
So we're very, very focused on communication solely within education. So we call ourselves the simplest, easiest communication platform. What we are essentially is a cross-platform, right? So if a teacher, the primary experience is on web and on mobile. The teacher creates a message, whether it's just a simple update, a assignment, a event, an emergency, a request for volunteers. They can create it in one place from their handheld device, iPhone, Android, of course, or web. And a parent doesn't ever have to worry, they never have to worry about how a parent wants to receive it. So if a parent doesn't deal with mobile apps, fine, they can choose email, it goes to email. If they don't deal with email because they don't have a computer, they only have a dumb phone, right, a flip phone, they can go to text message. So you make sure that absolutely every parent in every socioeconomic status can receive any kind of necessary information from a teacher or from a school, regardless of what kind of device they hold every day. And we do have competitors that are mostly focusing on text, but we basically make it kind of a social play on school communication. So parents are able to ask a question or comment in a public forum to anything that's going on in the school. So I'm not a teacher, right? And none of the people in our company are teachers. We have a whole teacher advisory board to kind of, like I said, supplement your weaknesses. And teachers, I don't know if people know or have friends that are teachers, they spend more time outside of the classroom than they do inside, and most of it is communication. And part of it is because that industry is completely archaic. They're still dealing with paper things going back and forth for field trips. I mean, it's absolutely preposterous. And there are players in the game, but we're aiming to try and digitize every mechanical transaction that is between a teacher or a school and a parent.
Awesome. I just wanted to make sure we were clear.
Oh yeah.
Everyone was
So yeah,
we
we're no longer working with Beyonce and the Staples Center and which I'm happy to talk about that.
So can you tell us, how can we as a community support and attract more entrepreneurs to Orange County or to stay here as well? Because a lot of times they'll get going and then they kind of leave too, especially in technology. But how can we kind of get people to stay?
It depends who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to investors, I would say start spending money here. That's like a common thread to what I'm talking about, isn't it? But for people, I mean, I think it's we've had big exits, right? You have something like Oculus that that goes off and does this huge deal, or I mean, there's big companies down there. There's people that they're starting from absolutely nothing and having exits, and it's also the most amazing place in the world to live. So I think that if you start something interesting and maybe pull some people down here from other places, part of me wants to say hire from within, right? Hire the guy down the street, hire someone from Orange County, but I also believe that if you get somebody and kind of pull them out of Silicon Valley or places that are, the place to be, and then there's an exit or then there's something great, I think people up there will start talking about down here. So I'm not saying go outside of Orange County, but maybe go outside of Orange County.
Just bring them back.
Yeah, and bring them back here. Draw them back after you have a big exit. Do you want to talk about Pivot?
Yeah.
I don't know if people are interested.
Yeah. Let's talk about
All right.
Pivot.
So she called it Pivot, so I kind of want to talk about that because I get that question all the time. So how did you know when you wanted that kind of a thing?
But it's okay to pivot.
That it's okay to pivot,
A lot of
right?
times people feel that, they are afraid to pivot.
Yeah.
They stick to that one idea, but you guys were able to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure
work through
people
it.
know the big, huge pivots that are out there, or maybe they don't think about them because it was a while ago. Everyone knows that Twitter started as Odeo, right? I mean, it was doing something completely different. Everyone knows, Fab.com, that's clothing, right? That started as a social network for mostly gay men. It was called Fabulous, right? What else is there? Instagram, which everybody probably used today, was Bourbon, and it was basically check-ins, right? It was Foursquare. So pivoting is okay. They just stop talking about it once they get 300 million users, right? So essentially, ours was a pretty easy decision. I mean, we were kind of like 8 or 9 months pregnant with the Indiana Pacers. We had this deal that was going. We had just done Kamikaze, which if people haven't been, it's Comic-Con that's in LA that's partnered with Stan Lee. There's another failure or another hiccup. We had 10,000 people on the platform at the first time at one moment, and the whole thing was just absolute disaster. We had somebody just restarting the server every 3 minutes because it kept crashing. But so we had all these things going, and then it would be like the Pacers spent $20 million on a scoreboard, and they said, hey, we got to do this next season. Or we started doing testing in Staples Center, and the infrastructure, literally the wireless infrastructure, like their Wi-Fi couldn't handle what we were building. So we had built this thing up to a point where, something comes up over the Jumbotron. It says, what pitcher pitched a no-hitter in 1965, an A, B, or C, and you'd kind of nudge your buddy and say, oh, it was A. We had actually built it in there so that you could pick it live, and if you got the right answer, it would give you $2 off beer for the next 5 minutes, and you'd flash mob or BuzzMob to the stands and get your $2 off. We built all this stuff, but the infrastructure couldn't take it. So we had kind of said we were going to pre-seed and get in there a little bit ahead of when the infrastructure of these locations could do that, right? To this day, so that was 3 years ago. To this day, the only center that could probably do it is the Levi's Center up in San Jose that the 49ers just built. And it's because it's an ungodly amount of money that they spent there. So at a certain point, we said, all right, I could do another raise and just kind of sit on our hands until the infrastructure of the places that we're trying to go into, gets up to par. But I don't really want to raise a whole bunch of money just to sit and wait. So you have a burn rate, and you can see this is how many months I can last if we're going to do this. And we still believe in this. And I know that 10 years from now, when I go to an Angels game, it's going to be a totally immersive, interactive experience. It sucks that I won't be the ones who have created it, but at a certain point, we had all these parents that had gone to Kamikaze and had gone to AFI Film Festival, and they said, this was awesome. I was able to get up-to-the-minute information, the people that I was with about the event. Could we use this in our school? 6 schools in Irvine. We said, all right, cool. I remember being in a meeting, and somebody came in and said, hey, do your schools want to use it? And I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. I'm on the phone with the Pacers. I didn't even think anything of it because I was here with this sexy thing where you're talking to Alicia Keys. And they had 70% parents sign up within the first 2 weeks. And I remember the day that happened. I was like, what the hell are you talking? Why? This isn't even built for them. This is what? And we realized they absolutely need it. They're saying we need this communication. So, and I talk about that a lot. Having a problem that actually exists that you're trying to solve, that's a must, right? You can't be solving a problem that kind of exists or something that this experience in event centers that's going to be awesome. It's not a problem right now that they don't get to answer the scoreboard and get $2 off beer. It's not something that they desperately need. Sure, the franchises want it to make extra money, but it's not a problem. Emergencies in schools where parents don't know when there's a God forbid an emergency happening on the campus immediately because they don't have a smartphone or they don't get email, that's a problem, right? So the pivot for us was obvious, and that kind of also goes back to the investor thing, where whenever you take money from any investor, make sure they're investing in you first, not in your idea. Because if my investors in my Series A, that $2 million round, if they had been investing in this application that exists in events, right? And they were tied up in the sexiness of sports and music, they would have bailed the second I said, hey, we're going into schools. There's nothing sexy about that. Maybe it's altruistic, sure, but they invested in me and in our team, and they believe that I'm going to figure out the right chorus and be responsible with their money to get them a return and to make something great happen, whatever it is. So whenever you take money, make sure that person is investing in you regardless of what the trajectory of the company turns out to be. It's my monologue for the night. It's as good as I'm going to do, so.
Anything you live by or quote maybe?
Okay, I have, I said this earlier. 3 years in a row, my New Year's resolution was 100%, quote, 100% of nothing is nothing. Right? I don't know if it's something that I live by, but it's something that I came to believe within being an entrepreneur. Especially when you're first starting out, you're guarding equity, right? You're saying, no, this is my idea. I've done everything. I've foregone, X amount of dollars in a job that I could be going and making 6 figures at, and this has ruined my relationship with my girlfriend, and I've done so much. I need all this equity, and then you realize 100% of nothing is nothing. If you had given up 20, 30, 40, 50% to bring people on board and to maybe partner with other people to get the thing to, once you get to that, these unicorns that we're talking about selling for $1 billion, who needs $1 billion, right? I mean, if you ended up with a third of that, a fourth of that, an eighth of that, come on. So that's one. I think another one that I kind of say and share a lot is I believe, honestly, that the companies that survive and thrive only do so by refusing to fail. They didn't find some sort of magic thing. I mean, maybe there is, I believe that some of these things are kismet, and that, you know, you can be at the right place at the right time, and I believe you actually have to be one of these sort of unicorns. But for the most part, every company that is what you aspire to be today was at one point in that famous trough of sorrow. Like at one point there was a CEO waking up saying, like, I can't do this. Nobody believes in us. We're not selling enough. Like, I'm going to run out of money. My investors are sick of me. Whatever. I guarantee you there was a moment where they could have so easily said, I should just go get a job, or I should do something. Like, they exist today because at some point they refused to fail. They got up and they said, the easiest thing would be, I should quit, but I'm not going to. So companies that exist because they refuse to fail is another one.
I love that. So the last question I have for you, let's give them a round of applause. A lot of good information.
These are like my best nuggets. I have a whole Evernote, right? That's just called nuggets. And when I read something or I hear something that's like hits me, and it's like, wow, I got to remember that. I got to read that in the morning or read that at night, or that's going to be my thing for the month of December or whatever it is. I have this thing that's just called nuggets, and I write these little things that I read and people say. So if I can be a nugget for someone else, woo!
Yes. I got a lot of nuggets tonight.
Good.
The last question I have is really just like, what's next for you, for BuzzMob?
Yeah. So I've kind of never been as excited about what we're doing as I am right now. So there's going to be a phase. Like I said, we raised $2 million a couple of years ago, and we were still doing entertainment, and we were doing sports and whatnot. And then at some point in that, like I said, we pivoted, and since then we've built an amazing product. And you're managing burn, right? As a CEO, you're kind of saying, here's what we've got, here's what we've got left. We finally, and I know you mentioned maybe talking about this, but we finally now have actually a revenue model. So before that, we were just building up users and of the mindset that at some point you're going to be valuable based on data and based on having all these users and eyeballs. Now we have a revenue structure, which, you know, we haven't really marketed, right? So we've built this amazing product, something I'm really proud of, and something all the people that are on right now are really happy with. And so this round that we're currently raising is finally going to allow us to kind of get it to the masses, get it to a lot of people. And it's still not what, you know, what I would call our closest competitor has raised $65 million in the last like year and a half. They did it within 14 months. So we're still going to be this tiny little thing. But that's another thing is, you know, I'm a firm believer in that the next companies in a lot of these cases, because the bar or the threshold for what you need to create something to get it out into the market and then potentially to market it has come down if you get creative. A big believer in the best product, and even the people with the most money in the next several years are not going to be the ones that win. People with sort of a new take on business development, creative marketing, and also content. So that's I could sit here for an hour and talk to you about content marketing and the importance of everybody being a media company right now. But those are the people that are actually going to win. So right now we're about to raise a $3 million round. We actually, today we have a lead for today. So we've got our round started and we need a couple $1 million left. But I'm so excited to get it out there because for the first time, you know, like I said, we're actually doing something that's a problem that really needs to be solved. And firm believer in, you know, we exist basically as BuzzMob because we think that the best result in a student being a positively contributing member to society is based on a support system that's comprised equally of home and school, right? So in a lot of areas, especially low socioeconomic areas, the balance is not very, very even, right? You've got a lot at school and little at home and maybe vice versa. So we're trying to kind of make that cohesive balance there, and we think that, you know, everyone wants to think they could change the world, but I think if we do this right now, you know, I might be able to someday say that we helped a lot of kids. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
out and sharing with our community.
Did they ask questions? No.
I know we went a little longer, but I just was like, there's so much. I mean,
I'm
he's
long-winded.
just really great to listen to. I mean, he has so many great nuggets and things. But he'll definitely hang out.
Welcome to the Startup Grind.